At 58, my name is Olivia, and I've lived a life that many women only dream of. I'm far from ordinary, bold, confident, and unapologetically myself. I might be a little on the fuller side, but I've got curves that could make any goddess jealous. I walk through life with a sense of self-assurance. My caramel skin is smooth, my hair always neatly styled in an elegant bun, and I have a smile that stops people in their tracks, no matter my age. I've mastered the art of leaving a lasting impression. My life has been a blend of luxury and independence. I own a flourishing chain of boutiques and indulge in the finer things life has to offer. But there's one thing I've never enjoyed: housework. Cleaning, cooking, organizing. Those were never my thing. I hired housekeepers to handle it, and over the years they came and went. None stayed long enough to make a real impact on my life, and honestly, I never minded. Until Mason. It all started one warm Monday morning when I was lounging in my spacious living room. My home, a grand mansion with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers, was always quiet. The staff moved with the grace of shadows, never wanting to disturb me. That's when Mason walked in. The first time I saw him, I couldn't believe my eyes. There he stood in the foyer, his blue eyes scanning the room with a depth that made my heart skip a beat. He had a boyish charm, a dimpled smile that could light up the room, and brown hair that fell just so over his forehead, giving him a rugged yet polished look. At 30, he was tall, broad-shouldered, and fit, exuding an air of quiet confidence with every step. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his voice rich and velvety. "Call me Olivia," I corrected him, surprised by the warmth in my tone. There was something about him that felt different. From that day on, my house was never the same. Mason wasn't like any other employee I'd hired. He made my life easier without being intrusive. The house was always spotless, meals served right on time, and everything perfectly organized. He anticipated my needs before I even voiced them. "Your tea, Olivia," he'd say, placing a steaming cup next to me before I even realized I wanted it. I started looking forward to his presence, not just because he was efficient, but because he was thoughtful. One day, I casually mentioned how I missed the scent of fresh roses in the house. The very next day, every vase in my home was filled with beautiful red roses. "Where did you get these?" I asked, intrigued. "I have my ways," he replied with a mischievous grin, the kind that made my stomach flutter. I began noticing little things about him, the way his dimple deepened when he smiled, the precision in his movements, and the way his gaze always seemed to linger on me with an intensity that made me feel special. At first, I told myself it was just professionalism, but as time went on, I couldn't ignore the way my heart raced whenever he was near. One evening, I was in my study, poring over business documents, when Mason appeared at the door. "Olivia, dinner is ready," he said. "I'll be down in a minute," I replied, not looking up. But he didn't leave. I could feel his eyes on me. When I finally looked up, I saw something in his gaze I hadn't noticed before. Was it admiration? Longing? I couldn't tell, but it sent shivers down my spine. "You work too hard," he said softly. "And you don't?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. He chuckled. "Maybe. But someone needs to take care of you." His words hung in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was sure he could hear it. From that day forward, things shifted between us. There was a new tension, a magnetic pull neither of us could deny. He began finding excuses to be around more, bringing me snacks while I worked, asking for my opinion on things he didn't need help with, and always being there whenever I called. One rainy afternoon, I was curled up on the couch, watching raindrops slide down the large windows. The weather matched my mood, restless, confused. Mason walked in with a tray of freshly baked cookies and hot chocolate. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting the tray down. "Thank you, Mason," I replied, my voice softer than usual. He sat across from me, his eyes never leaving mine. "Olivia, can I ask you something?" he asked. "Of course," I answered, curiosity piqued. "Why haven't you ever married?" His question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering. "I guess I've always valued my freedom too much. Marriage felt like a cage." He nodded thoughtfully. "But don't you ever feel lonely?" I laughed, trying to mask the wave of emotion his question stirred. "I have everything I need. Why would I feel lonely?" He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. He didn't believe me. And maybe, for the first time, I didn't believe myself either. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His smile, his kindness, the way he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. It both scared and thrilled me. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared breakfast. "Good morning," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Good morning, Olivia," he replied, flashing me that dimpled smile. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us filled with unspoken words. Then, without thinking, I reached out and touched his hand. He froze, his blue eyes searching mine. "Olivia, I don't know what's happening between us," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't ignore it anymore." Neither could he. And in that moment, everything changed. It was a beautiful Thursday morning, the kind of day where everything feels brighter, full of promise. The sun streamed through the windows, casting golden rays across the marble floors of my home. I had just finished getting ready for work, choosing a fitted red gown that hugged my curves perfectly, and a pair of elegant black heels. A swipe of signature red lipstick completed the look. As I stood in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but admire myself. "Olivia, you still got it," I whispered to my reflection, flashing myself a confident smile. I descended the grand staircase, the click of my heels echoing through the house. Mason was in the living room, dusting the coffee table. He looked up as I approached, and for a moment, his blue eyes lingered on me before he greeted me with his usual warmth. "Good morning, Olivia. Hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. As I turned toward the door, my heel caught on the edge of the staircase, and before I knew it, I was slipping. My heart raced. But before I hit the ground, strong arms caught me. It was Mason, moving faster than I could even process. His arms were wrapped around me, holding me against his chest. His face was so close I could see the faint stubble on his jaw and smell the clean, woodsy scent of his cologne. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and filled with concern. I nodded, unable to find my words, my hands gripping his shoulders. We stood there, frozen in time, his blue eyes shimmering in the morning light. And then, with a promise that felt deeper than words, he whispered, "I won't let you fall, Olivia." Before I could fully grasp what was happening, he leaned in. His lips met mine, soft, tentative at first, as if asking for permission. For a split second I froze, shocked by the suddenness of it all, but then something inside me melted. I kissed him back, hands moving from his shoulders to the back of his neck. The world around us disappeared, and in that moment, it was just the two of us, standing on the grand staircase, lost in a kiss that felt like it was rewriting everything I thought I knew about myself. When we finally pulled away, I was breathless. Mason's eyes searched mine as though trying to understand what had just happened. I didn't know how to begin. How could I put into words the whirlwind of emotions that were coursing through me? Mason stepped back quickly, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tense. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize," I interrupted, my voice more steady than I felt. But before either of us could say anything more, my phone rang, shattering the moment. It was a call from one of my business associates, reminding me of a meeting I was already late for. "I have to go," I muttered, more to myself than to him. Mason nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course." As I drove to work, my mind was in a swirl. What had just happened? Mason was my employee, a man 28 years younger than me. But when I thought about how his kiss made me feel, alive, cherished, wanted, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. When I got home that evening, I found myself feeling nervous. It was a sensation I wasn't accustomed to. I walked through the door, half expecting Mason to avoid me, but there he was, in the kitchen, preparing dinner like nothing had changed. "Good evening, Olivia," he said, his tone polite but distant. "Good evening," I replied, unsure of how to address the unspoken tension between us. We sat down to dinner, the silence between us heavier than usual. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "About this morning," I began, setting my fork down. Mason looked up, his blue eyes meeting mine. "Olivia, I shouldn't have crossed that line. I know my place, and I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" I repeated, surprised by his assumption. "Mason, if anyone should feel uncomfortable, it's me. I'm the one who let it happen." He shook his head, his expression earnest. "You didn't let anything happen. It was all me. I've been trying to keep my feelings to myself, but when I saw you about to fall, I couldn't hold back anymore." His confession left me speechless. For weeks, I had tried to suppress the growing attraction I felt for him, convincing myself it was simply admiration for his dedication and kindness. But hearing him admit that he felt the same way, it was like a dam had broken inside me. "Mason," I whispered, my voice trembling as I tried to gather my thoughts. Whatever this is between us, it's not simple. There's so much to consider. Our age difference, the fact that you work for me." But Mason didn't let me finish. "I don't care about any of that," he said, his voice firm but gentle. His blue eyes held mine with unwavering conviction. "Olivia, you're the most incredible woman I've ever met. You're strong, intelligent, beautiful. I don't care about the age difference. And if working here is an issue, I'll leave. But I can't pretend I don't feel this way about you." His words hit me like a tidal wave, sweeping away every wall I'd built around my heart. No one had ever spoken to me like that, so raw, so honest, so full of passion. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my chest rising and falling as I processed what he had just said. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," I admitted softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be," he said gently, stepping closer. His gaze never left mine. "Just let me show you how much you mean to me." His words broke through the last of my resistance. Tears pricked at my eyes as I realized I had been running from my own feelings, afraid of what they might mean, but standing here with him, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. "Mason," I said, my voice trembling, "I've been feeling the same way." His eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as if drawn together by some invisible force, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. This kiss wasn't tentative like the first. It was filled with all the emotions I had been holding back for weeks: longing, passion, and an overwhelming need to be close to him. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me tight against his chest as he deepened the kiss. Time seemed to stand still. Nothing else mattered in that moment but the two of us. His hands were gentle yet firm, cradling me as if I were something precious. The warmth between us grew, a connection forming that felt like it was wrapping us in an unspoken bond. As the evening wore on, the room grew quieter, the only sound our soft whispers and occasional laughter as we shared stolen moments of joy. "This feels like a dream," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's not," he replied. "It's real, Olivia, and it's just the beginning." We stayed there, wrapped in each other's arms, the quiet moments between us speaking louder than any words could. The connection we shared was undeniable, growing stronger with every touch, every kiss, every whispered word. The night stretched on, but neither of us was in any hurry to move. It was as if time itself had slowed down, allowing us to savor every second of the newfound love we had discovered. And in that moment, with his arms around me and his lips pressed gently to mine, I knew I had found something truly special. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless, our foreheads resting against each other. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea how long I've wanted this." I smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with my fingers. "And you have no idea how hard I've tried to fight it." He laughed softly, the sound like music to my ears. "Well, no more fighting. I'm yours, Olivia, if you'll have me." I looked into his eyes, my heart swelling with emotions I hadn't felt in years. "I already do." The next morning, I called Mason into the living room, my heart racing with anticipation. He walked in, looking as handsome as ever in his crisp white shirt and black slacks. "Olivia, you wanted to see me?" he asked, his tone respectful yet warm. "Yes," I said, standing to face him. "Mason, you've been an incredible staff member. Beyond incredible, actually. But as of today, I'm relieving you of your duties." His face fell, confusion and worry clouding his features. "Relieving me? Did I do something wrong?" I couldn't help but smile. "No, you did everything right. But you're no longer my staff. You're my man now. And my man doesn't do house chores." His mouth dropped open in surprise, and then he burst out laughing. His dimpled smile lit up the room. "Is that so?" "Yes," I said firmly, crossing my arms. "I guess we'll need to hire new staff, because my baby boy won't be lifting a finger around here anymore." He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around my waist. "As long as I'm taking care of you, Olivia, that's all I care about." True to my word, I hired new staff to handle the household chores. Mason no longer worked for me. He devoted all his time to pampering me like a queen. He'd surprise me with breakfast in bed, complete with fresh flowers and handwritten notes. He insisted on running my baths, adding rose petals and scented oils to make them as luxurious as possible. "Anything for my queen," he'd say, that heart-melting smile on his face. Our days were filled with laughter and love. We took long walks in the garden hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. He'd tease me about my love for red lipstick, calling it my signature look. "And don't forget the heels," he'd add one day, twirling me around in the living room. "You always look like a goddess in them." "And you?" I'd reply, running my fingers through his soft brown hair. "Always look like trouble." Of course, our unconventional relationship came with its challenges. There were whispers and raised eyebrows when people learned about our age difference. But Mason was my rock, always reassuring me that what we had was real and worth fighting for. "Let them talk," he said one evening as we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. "They don't know what it's like to love someone like you." His words melted away any doubts I had. Our love story was unconventional, unexpected, and utterly perfect in its own way. Mason didn't just treat me like a queen. He made me feel like the most important person in the world. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just living, I was truly alive. One night, as I lay in his arms, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I realized I had found something I didn't even know I was searching for. "I love you, Mason," I whispered, my voice filled with emotion. He kissed the top of my head, his arms tightening around me. I love you more, Olivia. Always. Please remember to like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to my channel for additional content.